On today's episode, we talk about growth and how you can take your journey from chance to more intentionality. You're listening to the Joshua Mentality. Oh, wow, that rhymed. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the Joshua Mentality. I am your host, Joshua, and this is week 38, folks. And this is a special week. This is actually quite an exciting week. There's a lot of things going on because this is also episode 20. That means we've gone through 20 weeks of the Joshua Mentality podcast. So give yourselves a round of applause for tuning in. I don't care if you didn't make it every week. You tuned in. You supported. I'm talking like it's over, but it's not. We got some more weeks to go. We got a lot more weeks to go here. But 20 is a big deal, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that I was ultra focused on and wanted to make sure of was that if I started this, I'd show up every week. And we show up and commit to at least 52 weeks. So we are far away from that. But 20 weeks is still nothing to scoff at, man. And I appreciate you all who have come along on this journey. If you are just joining this week, let me catch you up to speed. This podcast is all about reminding the listeners, you that's listening now, of how awesome you are and the purpose and just value that is in your life. And my job or my goal is to extract that out, let you see it, put it right in front of your face, and then hand it to you so you can go out there and really just maximize all that your life was intended for. Because we need it. We need it. Your community needs it. Your family needs it. Your friends needs it. Everybody. We all need all the greatness and the value that's within you. So every week we show up and we kind of do this conversation style. I bring up some topics or an encouraging thought, and hopefully it adds value to your life. All right. So that's the spiel. I like to always make sure I include those who are joining for the first week. Now that that's out of the way, one of the other cool things that's happening this week, or that happened this week, was Easter Sunday. Actually, let me rephrase that. One of the things that happened last week was Easter Sunday. And I'm bringing this up for a reason because I had this cool kind of moment. We were having this event at my church, and they were doing something afterwards where it's kind of just like a get together for the community. A lot of fun things, kind of kids, water, eggs, the whole deal. But I'm walking out to go get my son out of the car. And one of my friends approached me, one of my good friends approached me, and I thought, he was just coming up to say hi, so I love everybody. I love people. So I had to make sure I stopped to go say what's up. And after I shook his hand, he stopped me and he said, "Hey, I wanted to know how I can financially support the podcast." And listen, my whole life, if my grandmother were alive, she'd tell you this. It's very rare that there's an instance where I am left speechless. Even if I'm not verbally speaking something out loud, there's always some kind of response or thought in my mind. But this was one of those moments where I was really speechless. And it's probably the worst thing you can do when somebody's asking to support you, because I didn't know what to say. Not that I didn't have, like a PayPal or something set up, which that's the Joshua Mentality at gmail.com. If some of you out here listening are also wondering the same thing. But I really at that moment did not know what to say. And I just thought, man, how cool is this? How cool is this that someone who's listening, who feels like they got some value from the podcast is now wanting to contribute to it. And I just thought that was so cool. And I want to share that with you all. In fact, I think what makes it even more cool is this is one of the very first people. This is one of the very first people that actually pulled me aside also and said, "Hey, man, you should do a podcast." He had heard me speak before, and he was like, "Hey, I think that'd be very awesome." And at the time I was like, "Man, I don't have time for no darn podcast right now." But, he was one of those people kind of chiseling away at the excuses and that really encouraged me to just do it, just put it out there and see how many people I can add value to. So I just want to share that with you all. And if you're someone that feels the same way and you want to support the podcast, listen, I'm not going to say no to a blessing. So it's at the Joshua Mentality, one word together, at gmail.com. So no pressure for those of you listening, but if someone feels the same way, absolutely, I want to give you the opportunity to do that. All right. Now let's jump into this week's topic, because I am excited to talk about this topic. It's one of my favorite ones. And for those of you, again, who are just joining, we've been talking a lot about the mentality of success. And the mentality of success is broken down into 4 zones. I wish I could quiz everybody listening, but I can't hear you, so I'm going to have to tell you. It's 4 zones. So the 4 zones are dreams, discovery, development, and decisions. And we've kind of touched on all of those, but one of the ones we haven't really, spent a whole lot of time on is the decisions aspect or zone. And that's one that we're going to kind of touch on today, considering the topic of growth. And I gotta ask you, as I like to start off all of our, sort of conversations, even though I can't hear back from you, but I still like to kind of frame them with some questions. And so I got one question to start off our conversation for this episode. And it's, have you ever, or maybe currently, felt a bit frustrated regarding your growth, or where you're growing, or how you're growing? Have you recently, or maybe this is something that you're going through right now, where you've kind of, felt like, man, I don't really, my growth is not really focused. If that's you, I think this episode is going to really help you. We're going to kind of gain some focus and a little bit of insight into the growth topic and the growth journey, I should say. So the first thing I would say, and that I think is important to start off this conversation, is you need to know there are 2 types of growth. There are 2 types of growth, and I break them down this way. I break it down as voluntary and involuntary growth. Those are the 2 types of growth: voluntary and involuntary growth. Voluntary growth is really rooted in humility. Why? Because voluntary growth says, I have not reached the mountaintop yet. I haven't reached the peak, the top of my potential mountain. I haven't gotten there yet. So you know what? There's still room, space, and opportunity to grow. That's the voluntary type of growth. The involuntary type of growth is is the opposite. I call that, or I say that that's rooted in humiliation. And that may sound a little strong for some of you listening, but hear me out. The reason why I say involuntary growth can be rooted in humiliation is because involuntary growth has the mentality of, I'm good. I don't need to go any further. Like I've grown enough. I'm good where I'm at. And here's why I say that can be rooted in humiliation. Because when it's involuntary, that means you will run into, you're more susceptible to running into mistakes. You're more susceptible to making bad and poor decisions. And last but not least, you are much more susceptible to learning from what I like to call face plant learning, where it's just, smack after smack after smack of life having to be your teacher in that way. And that can be very humiliating. And I know humiliating, often we think about it involving other people, but that's not the kind of humiliation I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of humiliation that humiliates your purpose. It humiliates your life value. And that's a deep thought and concept. I won't get too deep into that because we're not really even going to focus on the involuntary piece. Because I believe if you're listening to this, you're more ready and prepped and eager to go towards the voluntary type of growth. So I don't really need to get into the idea or concept of humiliating your life purpose. But I just want you to know that that's the 2 differences. And if you are someone that's kind of delved into that involuntary type of growth, then I'm going to encourage you to step on to the other side during this podcast and moving forward. And let's get our voluntary growth on. All right. So let's jump into that. Let's unpack that a little bit more when we talk about voluntary growth. And what I want to do is I want to take you through just 3 types of voluntary growth. And I want you to think about, where are you within the 3? Which one are you? And then from there, I want you to consider how you can grow to the next level. And if you're on the 3rd one, then I want to encourage you to continue going. All right. So here's the top 3. Number 1, when we talk about voluntary growth, the first type of voluntary growth is growth by chance. Growth by chance. Growth by chance, I mean, you're growing. You are voluntarily growing. However, it's almost like on accident though, because there's no real design to it. And your decisions are good, but they're good mostly because of your surroundings. So you don't encounter some of that, humiliation and involuntary symptoms with the bad decisions and face plants. You don't really encounter a lot of that because your surrounding really kind of protects you from that. And you grow by chance because it's almost like by association. Picture someone that is standing outside and it starts to rain, right? Now it's going to rain. If I don't have an umbrella, it's going to rain on you and I. Now, did I go out there on purpose to stand in the rain? No, but it started raining and I happened to get wet by chance. And it's probably a terrible analogy, but it's the best one I got right now. But that's how growth happens sometimes. Growth can be, I'm not looking to growth, but I'm not looking to grow, but because I'm in this circle of friends and they're real focused on their growth, I happen to grow as well. So growth by chance. Growth by chance is not terrible. I do want to make that clear. It is not, just because it's the first one doesn't mean it's a bad one. But what I do want you to realize is growth by chance means that you're missing out on the rest of your growth potential. Growth by chance, you could only be hitting 3 to 5% or 5 to 10% of all of the growth potential that is waiting for you to access it. Think of it this way. We talked about a lot in past episodes about that development zone and the discovery zone and how they play together. You discover your gifts, strengths, and talents, and then you develop them. Imagine if you discovered your gifts, strengths, and talents, and then you just decided not to do anything with them. Or you decided to kind of just let them grow by chance. That's what we're talking about here. And some of you have gifts, strengths, talents, and you know it. Other people have told you, but you've never invested into them. I want you to change that today. I want you to honor those gifts, strengths, and talents. And let's move on from growing by chance to growing with a little bit more design. Having just a little bit of switching from the accidental growth to actually being more conscious and aware of your growth potential. I think that's just half the battle for many of us, just becoming aware of that growth potential. So the first, again, is growth by chance. That's the first type of voluntary growth. The second type is what I like to call scattered growth. Now, scattered growth is when there's a little bit of design. There's definitely much more of a focus, but that focus just seems to shift depending on what day it is, because there's no real plan. And that plan, that lack of a plan shows, because you sway from one growth focus to the other. It's kind of like this. It can also be called like squirrel growth, where depending on the day, what seems appealing, what kind of gets your heart racing and anxious because you just want to accomplish something or get to a certain level, that's scattered growth. And the danger in scattered growth is the same, old saying that we hear about goals and targets. There's a saying that says, if you don't aim at anything, you'll hit it every time. If you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And that's the same thing with growth. When your growth is scattered, it's almost like you're aiming at no growth at all. And so your growth will be stifled and you won't see as much return on your investment because it's so scattered. There's no plan. I had a friend recently that told me, you want to know what's the difference between kind of the middle class and the upper class? It's a very fine line, he said. He said, you want to know what that fine line is? Upper class, those folks, they have a plan. They have a strategy. And they see things from kind of a 30,000 foot view. And growth is the same way. When your growth is scattered, there's no plan, there's no strategy. And so you kind of end up in that wheel. They call it the rat race. You kind of end up in that from a growth perspective. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you felt this. You've had like years and years of focusing in so many different places, and you get to this point where you're frustrated. And you're frustrated because you can quantify the time that you've spent wanting to grow, but you can't quantify the plan or the strategy and the specific areas that you've looked to grow. So while you may have taken a step up from growing by chance, you're still encountering some of the other challenges of growing without a plan. So it's a little bit better, but it's still not quite where you could be. And you might extend a little bit more of your growth potential, right? You may hit a little bit more of the percentage. I said the first level could be 5 to 10 that you're only looking in, but maybe this one, the scattered growth, you could be hitting, 10 to 30%, maybe 10 to 20%. And that's not bad. I don't want you to, don't mistaken me. This is a natural process. So we're not talking about this because you're doing something wrong, but I think the more aware we are, the better we can continue to grow. And so if you're someone that's here, that's fine. And I'm sure you've seen a little bit more return on your investment than growing by chance. But there's more. There's more. And that brings us to the third one. And this third one is one that actually comes from one of the people that I look to when it comes to the topic of growth. And that's a man by the name of John Maxwell. And I love what he says about this third one. The third one is called intentional growth. Intentional growth. And here are the benefits of intentional growth. There's 3 benefits of this one. And this is where you want to be. Because intentional growth, what it does is it shifts your mentality from how long will this take to how far can I go? Think about that. Oftentimes when it's either growing by chance or scattered growth, we're so anxious because we're looking to get to a destination. Intentional growth says there is no destination. The destination is the end of my life because that's how long it will take to fully cash in on the growth potential that is within me. Someone who's focused on intentional growth understands that at every season of their life, there's new heights of growth to reach. In your teenage years, there's growth levels to reach. In your 20s, there's growth levels. In your 30s, and it goes on and on and on for the rest of your life. And that's not a burdensome thing. That should excite you because all you're doing is illuminating what's the greatness that's inside of you at every level of growth. But that's one of the first benefits. It changes our mentality and that question from not how long will this take? Instead, it says, how far can I go? How far can I go in my growth? How far can you go in your growth? If you made a decision today to be more intentional about your growth, how far could you go? How would that change your personal relationships, your business relationships, your friendships? All of the ships under people interactions in the value of life. How would that change things? How would that change the quality and the fulfillment in your life? My guess is it would have a tremendous impact. All from shifting your mentality to intentional growth that causes you to think, how far can I go? The second benefit is intentional growth creates a sense of urgency. People who are focused on intentional growth understand that life is not promised. So as long as I'm going to be here, I'm going to treat my life like a sponge, and potential is the liquid. And I'm going to make sure that my life just sucks up all of the potential that I have for as long as my sponge is here. Are you getting me? I hope this is pumping somebody up. Intentional growth creates a sense of urgency. If you want a little bit of a spark in your life, you want to feel, some of that oomph in your life, and that it doesn't feel so mundane and black and white. If you want to add some color to your life, become intentional about your growth and watch what happens. You will see new versions and new levels of yourself that you have not seen. I'm telling you, I've lived this. And I want you to live it too. But it starts with your intentionality. The last benefit of intentional growth, and I'll close us out here, is intentional growth. It causes you, I want you to get this, because this is one of the biggest things that hurts us. And we've talked about this in plenty of episodes. But intentional growth causes you to outgrow whatever fears have been holding you back. Because intentional growth diminishes those fears. It diminishes them. There are things that you were afraid of as a kid that now you look at as an adult like, I wish they would. Or I wish that thing would. I'm not afraid of that. But as a kid, you'd be terrified of it. Like the dark. I was terrified of the dark as a kid. But now as an adult, I prefer it. Turn the lights off. I can take a nap. You know what I'm saying? That's a silly example, but think about it. There are things, because your growth is kid size, that is holding you back from a portion of your purpose and the things you can accomplish in your life because you have not grown, you have not matured. There are things that as you grow, you will look back at some of those fears you had of maybe starting that business. You'll look back at that fear and you'll say, what? I was made for this. You look back at that degree or that college course, or you look back at that job. You say, what? I'm ready for the next thing. That's the power of growth, intentional growth. You outgrow these fears. And the more you grow, the more those fears diminish and they can no longer hold you back. I feel like air punching right now. This is what it's about, y'all. And so here's my encouragement for you. Figure out what level you're on and make a decision today to grow to the next level, wherever you're at on the ones we mentioned. All right? In the meantime, I want you to comment on this episode and the episodes of past. Please subscribe. Let me know how this is helping your life. I hope it's making you as pumped as it makes me. Again, thank you to all of you who support this week in and week out. And as always, I will see you all next week, same time, same place, reminding you that success is your destiny.